with it, in the hood with it. Welcome back to the Collective Clips, where you already know we get it in. But before we get it in, let's hit that like and subscribe button. Ding! Put your notification bell on all, so that way you're directing the direction of the dope content I am kicking. And I highly appreciate all the support, man. We're going up on this channel, and it's all because of you. And for that, I can say I'm very humbled and even more so appreciative, man. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. So I've been asked a lot of questions. And one of the questions that keeps popping up is people want to know exactly what the Norteño movement has to go through in prison, in the California Department of Corrections. It's very tricky. There's a lot you have to do. You have to be about to be a Norteño. It's definitely a humbling experience. It's definitely not for everyone. And there's a lot of things that you're going to fucking you're going to question yourself on. Okay, there's a lot of people that gangbang on the streets. They get jumped into barrios in Northern California, and they expect, that everything's going to be all good. People know that with gangs comes a little bit of turmoil, a little bit of strife. But at the same time, I don't think you're fully prepared to understand what it takes to encompass the Norteño movement, the historia, the culture, because it's got its own culture, until you get incarcerated behind them walls. Until you're in a real prison, a 4-yard, a 3-yard, fully activated, really stomping in your steel toes. Do you truly understand what it takes to be a Norteño? Now, the word Norteño is predicated on the word respect, okay, and canalismo. And you'll hear the word canalismo thrown around a lot, especially on social media. You hear it in music videos nowadays. This was a word that was very, I guess, not clandestine because it's a word that's out there, but it meant something to the Norteño movement back in my days. Canalismo was what it was all about. That was the cause. You hear a lot of Norteños talking about the cause. What's the cause? The cause is true canalismo, the coming together and defending of the homelands, of your barrios, of your area. Now, just because there are upstaters, Southsiders that have made their presence felt in Northern California does not mean that Norteño movement is dead, or it's over, or it's lacking, or it's watered down. That's furthest from the truth. If anything, it only builds and strengthens the bonds of canalismo. Those that have chosen that path in life to defend what they believe is their raza, that struggle is always going to continue. That building up of one another is always going to continue. But I was asked, a few different questions pertaining to the Norteños. How do they make it in prison having far less numbers than the Southsiders? Well, first and foremost, there's always been an unwritten code of respect when it comes to the opposition. Okay, and I've said it so many times. In order to be considered a true gangster, a true Norteño, Southsider, whatever you claim to be, Bulldog, Crip Blood, or even Wood, you have to understand that you're going to partake in things that you not necessarily want to, but it's just going to be like that. And also you have to do it with professionalism, class, and respect. Now, I've had a lot of people get at me and say, hey, what do you mean professionalism? You act like you're in college or you're a professor or something. Well, in some cases, you might be a maestro. It is your job as an upstanding Norteño, a righteous homeboy, to always educate those that are right there with you, to always give up game, to always make sure that everybody is in branch and union and on the same page. These were some of the things that were instilled in me, was taught to me when I was young. These are some of the things that I latched on, and I come to find out that they can help me in everyday life. So I'm going to tell you a few stories about some of the mixes I got involved in, but also at the same time, I'm going to tell you a few of the ins and outs about the Norte in prison. So one of the main questions that's asked to me is, why Norteños ever wore the Mongolian? And I've done a video on the history of the Mongolian, but I'm going to re-answer that because a lot of people have been asking me. There's new people to the channel. So what was the reasoning behind the Mongolian? For those of you that don't know what a Mongolian is, it was basically a braid, and not only a braid worn on the back of the head, but could have been worn on the side of the head, in the front. It is something derived and picked up from the Vikings as well as the Mongolians, right? Genghis Khan and his warriors. And this, of course, was something to them that meant warrior. It was a symbolization, and the longer that you grew your Mongolian out, the more seasoned you were in the game. Okay, the more you had fought wars, the more, you had made your presence felt. You were just a different elite type of class of a warrior. those that wore Mongolians were of the elite class. They were like the Marines, okay? They were like the fucking, and I don't want to compare it because I always get somebody that comes in, don't compare it to the United States Army. But at the end of the day, that's the comparison, okay? You were an elite group. You were compared to, like, I would say the Marines and the armed forces, or even the Rangers, you know, an elite group. Or at least that's what we considered ourselves. Now, the Mongolians were war in the late 80s and the early 90s. It became something fashionable within the Norteño movement. And the reason why the Norteños rocked the Mongolian was for two reasons. One was that symbolized that warrior spirit, to symbolize, you know, that Norteños are derived and come from the sangre of warriors, or at least that's what they believe, right? And two, it was for communication. See, back in them days, there wasn't a heavy Norteño presence in the prison system. There's always been a Southsider top heavy presence, meaning that they've always had the majority of the numbers when it comes to the Chicanos, Mexicanos. So the Norteños were in pockets. They would send them to yards, and, you know, it would be hard to identify them. Once they were identified, they'd either be fucking ran up on, taken advantage of, told to put on their shirts. And the CDC would place them wherever they placed them. You know, when you're sentenced to the California Department of Corrections, that means the California Department of Corrections. They would, back in them days, they would send you north, south, it didn't matter. You ended up wherever they had bed space. That's just how prison was. So in order to facilitate communication with other Norteños, there was a lot of Norteños that were basically not told, but encouraged to grow out of Mongolian, or they did it because they wanted to symbolize that they were a Norteño through and through, period. And that was a way to do it, because everybody on that yard would know, okay, that's a Norteño. He's mobbing a different way. He's with a different cause and a different group. And of course, that was a form of communication. If there was other Norteños on that yard, right when you got there, they would know, hey, that's a homie. They would pull you to the side, show you embracement, love, canalismo, give you the rundown. And if it was on, it was on. If it wasn't, it wasn't. Okay, back in them days, everybody was focused more on canalismo and numbers. They were playing the numbers game. There was a lot of different homeboys from Hayward, Merced, Modesto, Salinas, San Fran, Oakland, Tulare County, you know, the whole shebang, man, all Northern California. And it was more, and the focus of the cause was more on the canalismo and the love of the gente and the people, and maintaining and establishing yards. Whereas nowadays it has changed drastically. Nowadays it seems like the cause is not a dying cause, but everybody is more focused on, you know, getting rid of trash, you know, checking people's paperwork, making sure that they don't have anyone that's ever lacked in their movements. And I understand, man, one bad apple could spoil the whole bunch. I understand that one chink in the armor could fucking, you know what I mean? Could fuck up the whole armor. You're only as strong as your weakest link. That's definitely a philosophy that the Norteños live by. But at the same time, you know, when you focus too much on what's going on within, you lack to see what's going on out there, and you're not aware. And when you're not aware of what's going on that yard out there, what happens? Other people start to come in to establish, to gain numbers, to gain the majority of the numbers. And of course, they're going to see you already as the opposition, but they're going to see you as bendable, breakable, weak, easy to get over on, right? And it's always going to be a numbers game in prison. Always. Those that have the majority of the numbers, those that have the biggest presence, are always going to be not those that are most feared, but those that are people better be most aware of, because they're not scared to come at you. You know, it's just like a thing. Hey, you see a person in fucking town, you see them mobbing around, and you hit them up, hey, what's up, bro? And it's all love. It's all good. Oh, no, bro, what's up? Ooh, I don't even bang, all right? This, and that. Until you got 3 or 4 homeboys, and then that whole shit switches up. And that goes for every side. Then all of a sudden their chest is pumped out, and now they're claiming barrios and hoods and things of that nature, right? We have all been through that. You know, where you've hit someone up, like, where you from? No, I don't gang bang. I'm not involved in that, bro. I've moved on. All right, cool. 2 weeks later, they're with 6 homeboys. They're like, what's up, fool? Right? You're like, oh, shit. Come on now, right? So I think we've all seen that. And that, again, man, is how it is on a prison yard. Those that have the most numbers, it's not saying that when they don't, they're going to fucking be lacking in their macking. It's just when they do get the majority of the numbers, chests get pumped out a little bit, man. Shit starts to happen. So the Mongolian was basically a line of communication to let other homies know that to make your presence felt, that you were there on that yard. Now, somewhere around the mid-90s, you were highly encouraged to cut off your Mongolian, because things started happening. One of the main things that started happening is the CDCR started to validate all Mexican gang members, all gang members at an alarming rate. They were slamming people back in the shoes for indeterminates. And what was an indeterminate? That meant that once you got validated as a prison gang member or an associate of a prison organization, once you got validated as a gang member, period, you were going to be slammed back in one of the shoes, whether it was Tehachapi, Corcoran, at that time, Pleasant Valley, Pelican Bay. And then that was it. That was your home. And you can't be utilized, or you're not worth that much if you're slammed back all day. Those that are there are already there, and they've established that. So if all the soldados keep going back to the hole getting validated, then there's a less of a presence on the yard. And that's where business needs to be conducted. That's where people need to establish. That's what it's all about. Within the Norteño movement, it's about social status of equality. Okay, but if you have no soldados on that yard, then your power diminishes. You're no longer seen as a threat or an adversary or an opposition or even anyone on that yard because you don't have the numbers. So anybody can walk up on you. And believe me, it's happened from all different ethnicities, not just Southsiders. There's been times where there was only a few Norteños on the yard, and you would expect the brothers or the blacks who they function with as far as on the same side of the yard to show them love. And in some cases, it may be like that, but in some, it may not. You know, I've always noticed that there's a lot of LA Crips or brothers that are from Southern California. Then if the Norteños don't have a lot of numbers, they won't show them as much love as you would think. They'll be kind of like, you guys are just in our way, homes. You guys are just on our bar working our way. And then that causes conflict, and in the end, it causes guerra. Because no Norteño in prison is going to stand down or bow down, man, or tuck his tail and run. They're going to fucking stand their grounds, regardless of numbers. That's just how it is. I think that's one of the things, one of the philosophies that's put out to the Norteños that makes the homies, man, love the movement that much, is that it doesn't matter about numbers within the Norteño cause. You're going to stand your ground first and foremost and full-fledged. Period. Or you're at least encouraged to. Don't get it twisted. There are those that do fucking put their shirts on and dip out and roll it up. But for the most part, if a Norteño hits that yard, the CDCR is aware. Everyone on that yard's aware. These guys are going to hold it down, man. They're very militant in nature, and they ain't going nowhere. That's just that. Now, the Mongolian was told to be disregarded or gotten rid of because, like I said, they were starting to validate people, and that could be a validation point. Basically, you were putting out there that you were a Norteño, so the Mongolian could be labeled a validation point. And not only that, it also started to have the reverse effect. Whereas it became communication to let other homeboys know that you were there, it also became a target. As soon as you would get to a place, if the Southsiders seen you had a Mongolian, they obviously knew you weren't part of their movement. And so if you did not have numbers, there was guerra there, and you're just pulling up from a reception like Tracy, San Quentin, wherever you're pulling up from, then they would already know. And so they could target you and get off right there in R&R. And best believe, things happen right off the bus, right in R&R. They always have convicts working R&R, which is receiving. Okay, and there's been plenty of cases where vatos don't even make it to the yard. You know, the Southsiders or the opposition, whoever you're going at it with, could be the Woods, could be the Blacks, at that particular time, have decided that they have you on site anytime that you're seen outside of a cell or you're seen, period. And this happens for all different groups at all different times. If you're at guerra, right? They're going to take any chance they can to take flight or put some metal in you. You could find a nice sized piece of a locker in your stomach if you don't fucking be on your P's and Q's. That's why within the Norteño cause, man, there's always going to be communication and information. And information is key in prison for all groups. You need to know what exact yard you're going to, what's going down there, who's fucking what and what's who. You know, so within the Norteño movement, man, there's always a lot of information that's being passed constantly. And people are put within a COC, they're put within a set group to facilitate that communication, that information. Because imagine if all information stopped. And nowadays, information's very easily, you can easily get it. You're provided tablets in the CDCR. People have cell phones, so it's easy to pick up a phone and call. But just like it's easy to pick up a phone and call to help a homeboy out, it's also easy to pick up a phone to tear a homie down. And believe me, those phones are utilized more so to check you, to figure out who you are and what you got going on, more so than to help you. That's the truth. So The Mongolian in the mid-90s was disregarded. Now, something else happened around 97, 98, and that was El Norte law, right? And when that was put out within the Norteño movement, because prior to that, of course, in prison, just like the Southsiders, there was no barrios. There was no, you could be right there rocking with your enemigo from the streets, and that's just the way it was, man. If you did red on red, that was considered a cowardice act, betrayal of the people, and you were going to be put in a situation where you were green lighted or put on the BNLs, which is a bad news list, or even the NGLs, which is the no good list, right? They're pretty much the same thing. The no good list is set in stone. The BNLs fluctuates from people that are on ice, people that are on freeze, people that have some get backs or they don't. It's just to alert and another fucking form of a layer of a clandestine movement to let people know, who's who. That's why when you get, as a Norteño, when you pull up to a prison, yes, you might make it through R&R. You might make it into a cell with the homie. You're going to be on ice, man. He's going to question where you've been, who you've been around, just to make sure. Because the Norteños are very secretive and they're very security based. You don't want someone coming in trying to get information, or you could kind of gauge someone if they're falling off, they're starting to lean back, or if they come in, and they have status. You just want to make sure that the person that you're in that cell with, man, knows what's up and he's good. Okay, so once you are cleared on that yard, then everything's good. So anyways, back to El Norte law. There was a dictation that was put out, a huila that was put out from the who's who of the yard. You already know who they are. That said, cease all red on red crime in the streets, and the Norteños needed to come together for two things: for a show of canalismo and a show of force, and to start functioning more on those yards. But also because what was happening at the same time was a lot of people were getting off on each other. It was getting real hectic. And you would go into prison, into the youth authorities, and function all together. What was the difference on the streets, right? The Sureños, the Southsiders, were establishing pretty thick and heavy in the 90s. They had already been around since the 70s and 80s. The 80s is when they took the title as Southsiders in the 70s. And that's the thing. We're going to touch on the history right now, but, for those that don't know. But around the 80s was when the Norteño and the Southsider label was given. And of course, I've heard a story, man, that has started way back in the youth authority, as well as I've heard stories that has started by the CDCR, where they started to label Norteños, Northern Hispanics, and of course, Southern Hispanics. But I've also heard, man, that there was vatos in the youth authority that started out the Southsiders, Sureños, or Norteños as just their own little thing. And then it just, of course, they gravitated into prison and they became soldados for prison organizations. So anyways, when El Norte law was passed, you started to see a lot more homies or Norteños function together on the streets, just like they did in prison. And that was true unity. That was canalismo. Now, there's still red on red that happens. There's still conflict, man. I don't think it will ever. I know Sacramento is heavy red on red from time to time. If you are locked up on a red on red crime, you might be able to justify it, or it might be a no get back policy where you can't get back, depending upon if you kill another homie. You're probably asked out, man. You're not going to get cleared. You're going to get whacked, right? So most of those guys check in right from the gate because they know. There's a lot of guys that will check in right from the gate, right in the cop car, right in the county jail. And the reasons they do that is, one, they either have a bad case. Two, they're either scared. Or three, they already know that they fucked up along the way, man, and their old business is going to catch up to them. And it's going to be all bad. Because one thing about the Norteños in discipline is when they feel that they have to put hands on you, when they feel that it's come to a violent situation, then it gets very violent, and you're gone. There is no more get backs. Now, as far as the Southsiders and the Norteños having a difference of an opinion on discipline, because everybody's going to get disciplined in prison. Prison is full of maintaining and people that will keep you in check. You got to keep yourself in check, but best believe if you can't, if you're wild, if you're a hothead, if you like to wiggle like that, there's going to be older homeboys that will definitely keep you in check or lace you up and give you the rope to hang yourself. So in the Norteño movement, there is a lot of discipline. There's writing of essays, there's workouts, and these things are to make you think. You educate someone into the plight of what they did wrong. If you make them do an essay and make them sit down and think about it, it becomes second nature not to do that again. And it's not oh man, I hate doing essays and I hate doing that. And it's not holding these guys accountable and making them like kids and forcing them to do something. and having a you're less than I am mentality. What it is more so is teaching them the errors of their ways. So that's why you do that. Now, of course, when it becomes something physical, that more so is so that they have to exert that certain energy, man. They have to go out there, they have to bust down. They have to remember that, hey, if you're going to be with the cause, you have to make sacrifices for the cause. And the first thing you're going to sacrifice not only is your mentality, but your body, man. You know, if you embody the movement, the Norteño movement, man, then you're going to make the ultimate sacrifice at the end. Whether it be stabbing someone on the yard, whether it be putting in work, whether it be facilitating messages and dope or whatever it is, you are going to do that. Why? Because no bed space is free in prison. No bed space. You will have at one point in time to put in that work. And with the Norteños, man, they do. They do because the numbers are a lot less. So there's always been a known fact that when you go to certain prisons, you're going to have to get off, man, or you're going to have to get down. So, you know, there's people out there that think that Norteños never put in work or that they're one way or the other, man. And you totally got a misconception. Nowadays, it's a lot different. But back in them days, man, you didn't know where you were going. So you always had to get off. I've been in places where I've had to get off, go to the hole, get off, go to the hole. Until you get to a comfortable spot that's already established by homeboys. And that doesn't mean just because you get to a prison, you get to get off that in that prison. If it's an active prison, if it's a good prison, it is your job to establish, to plant your flag, to when more homeboys come, not recruit, because that's a Fed thing. They don't recruit in the state prisons, not usually, right? I have seen homeboys come in that weren't necessarily Norteños in the beginning, and they start getting, you know, embraced and indoctrined. And then they become homies, you know? And that's another question. People have asked, you know, what happens to guys that are from Northern California, Chicanos, but they're not from a barrio? You know? Well, let me tell you what's going to happen. They're going to have to get with the program or get done by the program. Okay, you have a choice. In prison, you're not going to run by yourself. You could go try to run with the paisas if they accept you. You know, they're not very accepting to just anybody. If you can't speak Spanish, if you go in there, you're a Chicano, man, more than likely the paisas ain't going to want to have nothing to do with you. Okay, the Southsiders, if you're not from Southern California, or you're not an upstate, or you're not from a barrio like that, there are some cases where vatos are sympathizers, and they will, you know, get love. But you're from Northern California, homes, you better get with the program. Okay, so that's what happens. Doesn't mean that you have to be a Norteño, but you're going to function with the Norteños, and you're going to put in work just like a Norteño would. So most guys actually just become them. So now, things have changed now. Okay, when it comes to being a Norteño in prison. And it's very hard. You know, I heard Dubs did a video and he said he thinks that the Southerners probably have it the hardest in prison. And we have a little bit of a difference of an opinion. I agree though. The Southsiders have a lot of shit going on within themselves. There's a lot of jealousy, envy, haterism. And when you're soldados, there's so many of them, it's hard to maintain control. It's hard to, you know, everybody has a different attitude. So vatos, you know, they're in close proximity of each other. There's going to be a lot of dirty macking and dirty politicking to people because everybody wants to be top dog. Now, within the Norteño movement, the numbers ain't as, there ain't as many soldados, right? But what you have, what makes it so difficult, what I believe to be a Norteño, probably one of the hardest in the California Department of Corrections, is because everybody, the Norteño movement, you're indoctrinated to believe that you can't be fucked with. You're indoctrinated to believe that you're number one amongst everybody. Basically, that the shit don't stink, man. That you're the elite or the most militant group. And it's been said over and over again by people that have done time with Norteños. They agree. You know, the way that they show that is by the workouts, the cadences, you know, the way they post up on the yards, just different things, different variations of things. And all that is meant to not only discourage people to go against them, but to let people know that they're never lacking. They're always ready on them yards, right? But within that same token, you also have a lot of inner bullshit, man. And with the Norteños, because they believe they're so elite, any little infraction, man, could be your ticket out. You could be all good for a year straight on the yard, and a homeboy comes, man, and you're dirty max and dirty politics you, and it's over. You know, I'm going to tell you a situation right here. Tell you a situation that happened. And this will show you just how crazy it gets within every movement. But this was within the Norteño movement. There was a homeboy, a very well-known homeboy. He was a rap artist, very well-known, you know, up north in Northern California. So he had a lot of that celebrity status. The homies see him, hey, what's up, bro? You know, they were shocked to be on the same yard as him. But he was just like anyone else. See, nobody is above anyone else. If you have status, you still, man, treat others the exact same way. And I remember people used to take advantage. I remember when I was a Norteño, they used to be like, to the Northerners, those are just enters, bro. They're just enters. Believe me, there's a lot of hating, a lot of shit that happens behind the scenes that you don't see. But anyways, this Vato was on the yard doing his thing, and he had an old lady that used to come visit him. Fine old lady, right? And his celly was someone of status, someone who was somebody, right? And he seen the homie's old lady. He would see that she would write him pictures, take care of him. And I guess he got a crush on her. He started to like, so he found somehow was able to steal his fucking celly's, the address of his old lady, started to write her on the unders. And of course, it ain't all his fault. Her fault too, for even not letting her old man know what was going on, for just fucking, you know, being a tirada. And so as he's writing her, she starts to come visit him, right? Things start to happen. And it comes to the point where he knows his homeboy's about, he knows the celly's about to find out, the rapper dude's about to find out, right? And so what does he do? He dirty politics him and gets him whacked on the yard. Now this guy got some get backs later on when that story was found out. But can you see the criminal nature and the treacherous nature? He wanted his old lady, so he was willing to kill him for him. But he wasn't willing to do it. He had other people do it for him because he had status. What I'm saying is this, man, there's a lot of shit that goes on, and it's individual shit, but that's not what encompasses the Norteño movement as a whole. For the most part, it's canalismo and a coming together and standing tall. You know, every time I was in the county jail, and my county jail was a very functioning county jail, we had when it was the active Norteño, we called it the block. Sometimes it was 3 blocks, sometimes it was 4 block. And man, there was so much respect there and love, but it was a dangerous situation. If you had any smut, any dirt, or acted out of character, man, you were fucking meta-flighted out of there. I've seen pegadas happen left and right. You better not have any dirt. I'll just say that. That's how that was, right? Now, I also get asked the question, why are there so many dropout Norteños? First of all, there's no dropout Norteños. Okay? Let that sink in. There's no dropout Norteños. In order to be a dropout, you have to be dropped out of the big 4 prison organizations, okay? What there are is Norteños in bad standings that are no longer functioning. Same thing goes with the Southsiders. If you're from a barrio, Hawaiian Gardens, Montiflores, 18, Florencia, I'm just naming a few, right? 12th Street Sharkies, in respects to all them barrios. And you fall back or you get put in bad standings, you're not a dropout like people think. Okay, you're just in bad standings. People that were from the big 4 prison organizations that debrief and fall off, they are considered dropouts. Okay, that's just some history for the people that like to loosely throw that word around. That's the truth of it. You know, that's actually the real giving you guys the real fuck what it means. Okay, the real definition. Now, there are a lot of non-active Norteños. And it's not because it's harder to be a Norteño than anything else. But I think just people are tired. They're tired of going through some of the bullshit. You know, never having the numbers, always being slammed down. And you would think you see it, oh, there's a lot of Norteño dropouts. But it's about equal when it comes to North and South on them yards. Non-actives or people that are in bad standing. There's a lot of whites and not as many blacks. I would say the blacks probably have the least numbers, and it's not because they're the downest or the hardest. It's because their politics are different. Okay, do they hold each other accountable? Yes, they do, but it's just a little bit different politics. So anyways, man, you know, the Norteño movement it's a hard movement. It's a movement that continues to grow daily. I know there's a lot of misconceptions and myths thrown around constantly that, you know, Norteños basically are all dropouts because they're from a prison organization that dropped out of another prison organization, and that's not the truth at all. If you know your history, if you know what it is, there was already a prison organization based in Southern California in place, and a whole bunch of vatos from Southern California, not Northern California. There was no Norteño or Sureños on that yard. That label or title wasn't given to vatos. There was just Mexicanos from up north, Mexicanos from down south, and they were just all Chicanos and Mexicanos. Okay? But a lot of the raza from down south didn't want to take or partake in what was going on, so they started their own thing up. Later on down the line, man, it became a North and South thing, and that's just what it is. So it wasn't like anyone dropped out of anyone, man. It was just 2 different groups. One group that was established, one group that decided to establish, and that's how that went. They became mortal enemies. And nowadays, man, they function on the same yards. Will there ever be not an anti-hostility, but a coming together? I don't know. I'm not there, man. I'm not in prison dictating that program. I just know that this end of hostilities, which is what's going on now, where Norteños and Sureños are no longer getting off like they once were. But I'll tell you, even back in my days, pre-end of hostilities, you rarely seen North and South incidences. Didn't happen too much. Now, of course, Norteños would go to Southern California prisons that they didn't have the numbers, and there would be situations. And I always question that. If these vatos are getting off on the homies, if we're all the same, fuck these vatos. Why don't we get off on them, right? But of course, that gets shut down because one thing about your voice is, hey, keep it shut. We'll hear it when we choose to hear it, right? So that right there, things like that, makes you get disillusioned with the cause and makes you kind of take a step back like, hey, bro, it's always not the same. And it doesn't mean that it's weak or watered down. It just means the person that is in charge of that particular yarda ain't trying to hear that shit. He's got his own agenda. He's doing his own thing. Anyways, with that being said, I hope I answered some of the questions. What it's like being a Norteño in the California prison system. It's not easy, but it's lovely if you choose to embrace it. Okay, just like the Sureño movement is as well. It's all love. But the one thing about the raza, they're warriors. We come from warrior blood. Okay, so we got pride, canalismo, man, love for our gente. And there's always going to be a situation where you find yourself in that you don't have the numbers. You don't have, the benefit of what others have. But that's the true measure of a man, how you're going to conduct yourself in that situation. With that being said, I hope that you move smooth with a purpose. Get everything that you want coming. And remember, at the end of the day, it's all about the strive to struggle, the struggle to strive. I hope that I was able to answer some of the questions. It gets deeper than this. Very much so deeper. I don't want to get involved in prison organization business. But let's just say, man, as a Norteño, as a non-active Norteño, right? What I once was, there was a lot of ups, a lot of downs. And the good outweighed the bad. But at the end of the day, man, the bad was much more vicious than the good, if you can read that. This is the gun.